Well, a few weeks ago, before the Olympic Games, I was lucky enough to catch up on Dashing Down's Olympic Adventures for Aussie Home Loans, who deal with anyone in Australia. They've got clients in every state and capital city, with Gerard Whateley, who got the opportunity to call the athletics for the host broadcaster in Australia, Channel 9. And Gerard's been good enough. And also, I thank him very much for jumping on again. He's only returned from Paris less than 2 days ago. He's a bit jet lagged, but the true professional he is. He's jumped on and done 360 last night in the AFL, and he thought, well, we may as well have a chat about the Olympic Games and the experience that he had. Gerard, welcome. Great to have you back in the country.
Dan, terrific to be back. I'm just actually back from the track and field from the school. Benji's athletics days today, so I just can't get enough of it.
And tell me about doing that after, obviously, the experience of doing the Olympic Games. Do you think you're an expert now?
It's funny watching the 200s and knowing that they've just got to balance up around the bend, and Benji's teacher's doing the commentary over the loudspeaker, and I know what all of this is about. No, it was good fun. It's hard to believe it, that it's sort of been and gone. It's been so long in the planning, and it was spectacular. What a city Paris was for it, and other than the weather for the opening ceremony, and not being able to swim in the Seine that day, everything pretty well went or was carried off just the way that you would like a games to be. It was a great games.
And you've been to a few now. Is it the best one?
Yeah, so I think Sydney, London, and Paris are the modern markers. Yeah. Is where I would sit, and Paris used its landmarks and its iconic history better than any other city I've ever been to. London reminded itself what a great city it was, and then I think the conviviality and the excitement around Sydney was distinct. So they've all had their absolute markers, but yeah, as Paris soared in the way that they staged events under the Eiffel Tower and in the Grand Palais, and the choice of the marathon course and some of the shots from the road cycling was absolute genius, the way that they put it together.
When you got there, I know you're obviously still doing your homework, and you and I discussed how much homework you'd done, and it obviously stood you in good stead, because it was great even very early on, Gerard, when you had the preliminary heats of the sprints and those countries that we don't know much about. You were giving us great information. I said, gee, Gerard's gone beyond the call here. So the first week, was it spent mainly just doing your homework, or did you get a chance to have a look at some events?
Yeah, no, I felt like I'd done all the work that I wanted to by the time I landed. So I had a lot to do on the plane, so I used that time well. And then I was determined just to spend a few days enjoying it. So I landed on the Saturday, so the morning after the opening ceremony, which was a bit of a rainy day. And then from the Sunday, I went to venues. So I went to I started at the beach volleyball, because I think that's the iconic image that will last, and went and sat under the Eiffel Tower. And went to Roland Garros that day as Rafael Nadal was playing. I've never been to Roland Garros, so it's been a bucket list item. And Nadal was playing. So you walk into the venue, and there's this incredible silver statue, a very futuristic statue of Nadal. And then to be able to walk through and to watch him play on centre court was brilliant. I went and saw Jess Fox win her second gold medal at the slalom canoe course, which was about sort of in the leafy eastern suburbs, a village about an hour and 20 minutes out, and a couple of trains, and then parade through the village down to the river where the rowing was on one side and they built the slalom canoe on the other. And the beauty of that was you could be right on the banks. So they built the temporary grandstands on the far side, and then all the official and the media setup was on the near side. So you could walk up and down about 80 meters of the course, sort of follow Jess from about gate 8 to gate 17, and her mum's running down the course in front of her. So that was just an absolutely spectacular view, and something that I'll always think really fondly of, because Jess is one of the defining figures of the game and of these games. I went to Paris Saint-Germain's home ground to watch some football. So that's Parc de Princesse, so Princess Park, which owed a lot to the 80s grounds that we spent our childhoods at, and could use a bit of a lick of paint. And I still think the best thing I did was the Grand Palais where they staged the fencing was just utterly spectacular. The way that it'd have a $500 million renovation. They'd put the temporary grandstands on either side. The combatants would come down an ornate staircase, swords drawn, and tapping them as they came out onto the mats. And there's just ornate backdrop for something that you wouldn't typically go to. It was brilliant. Just brilliant. And I got to the swimming to see Leon Marchand, who is the defining figure of France at these games, and he won his first gold medal in the 400 IM, which is as dominant swimmers I've ever seen. And that crowd, about 60 metres into the race, everyone just leapt from their seats. They couldn't contain themselves anymore. And on the third leg, which was the breaststroke, is just every time he would stick his head above the surface, they would sort of roar, just this really punctuated roar at him so he could hear the crowd. And then when he turned into the freestyle, he was so far in front, it was a victory lap. And the anthem, when he was presented with his gold medal there, that's as stirring an anthem as I've ever heard. So, yeah, I got to take a lot in before we settled in at the stadium.
In regard to Jess Fox, she'll go down as one of the all-time greats. She just has nerves of steel, doesn't she? She is magnificent.
Yeah.
That performance in the K1 when she was the fifth runner in the final after not a great leg in the semi, and then she just had to sit and wait. I mean, that was just an unbelievable performance, and we know what the C1 final was like. She's a superstar, isn't she?
Yeah, I think that's right. Is that idea of nerves of steel? So she won them in two different ways. One, she had to make amends for a semi-final and then lay down a time which was just superior. So she had to wait them out. And then in the one I was at, there was a time that was set pretty well halfway through that no one got anywhere near until she took to the course and she beat it by 4 and a bit seconds. And they even sort of subsequently applied a 2-second penalty and just reduced the margin of victory. So, yeah, that's the glory of elite sport, is when the pressure's at its maximum and it demands the performance. She was able to do that repeatedly. And she'd also taken all the risks, I think. She was the face of the games from an Australian perspective. She was the first face and voice on Channel 9's broadcast. She carried the flag the day before competition. So she gave herself over to it, and then she still delivered her sporting performances. There'd be plenty who wouldn't be brave enough to take it all on, and there'd be plenty who weren't good enough to deliver against that, and she did both. So she becomes one of our modern day greats in the theatre at the Olympics.
Gerard Whateley has joined me to review the Olympic Games. Of course, he called the track and field for Channel 9 for Dashing Down's Olympic Adventures for Aussie Homelines. They've got over 25 lenders on their panel. Gerard, to the track and field now. What was the stadium like? Was it what you thought it would be?
It was brilliant. It's everything that a national stadium should be, 70+ thousand. It was full day and night for all 9 days of the program. It captures its sound really well. So it's such a clever design, as the roof hangs right over toward the field, so that the crowd is totally under the roof, and then the natural light and the weather gets in there. And such enthusiastic and knowledgeable crowds, and into everything. So the night that the track program had finished, but Mondo Duplantis was still going in the pole vault, and not a single person had left.
Wow.
And when he leapt the world record, it might have been the biggest roar of all through the 9 days and nights. So a good reminder of what a great stadium is and how central that is to an Olympic Games, and a bit of a warning for Brisbane that you can't be staging the athletics at the Olympics at what looks like a school venue. You need something with some real grandeur to it. And I think there'd be a few people who would have come back and gone, okay, so the plans that we've got are just not going to cut it, not when it comes to track and field in the Olympics.
You need to find a great venue, and I mean, even if they do the Gabba up, no good, is it? Or not up to scratch. No good's the wrong word, Gerard.
No, they'd have to rebuild it. Yeah, they'd have to rebuild it. So, and Brisbane chronically needs a rebuilt stadium anyway. I don't think the Gabba's the best idea. That Victoria Park idea seems like the perfect solution. But I mean, we've just seen in the past couple of days, Cricket Australia are leaving them off the long-term schedule, and the Brisbane Lions have outgrown the ground. And you've got to have something that in 50 years' time, we're all telling our grandkids, or this was the Olympic venue in Brisbane. So it's just part and parcel of it. And yeah, and the Stade de France was it was epic.
When we spoke before the games, we always talked about the 100 metres being the big events. We always thought there might be some controversy. Plenty of controversy in the women's 100 metres. Shalane Price didn't get to the start line. What's your take on all of that?
So, but it's still a bit unclear, Dan, isn't it? It was a shock on the night. And then, you know, the video of the squabble at the bus in the changed conditions of getting to the warm-up track, and then she never addressed whether she was injured or not. We know she didn't subsequently run in the relay, so clearly there was a hamstring issue as well as everything else that was going on. But yeah, what an incredible backdrop to it. And she had looked good in the heat, better than I imagined that she was going to look. So, I mean, Jamaica had a terrible time of things. It's between Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price and then Sharika Jackson withdrawing first from the 100 and then from the 200 with the hamstring injury that she had sustained. They didn't win a gold medal. There were on the track, there were relay teams that didn't qualify, and then there were relay teams that dropped the baton. And so really a disaster for Jamaica in the changeover. And then, you know, their main hope lost by a margin that you could still barely believe. So yeah, I had a bit of a giggle. If Don Argus was still doing reviews and reports, he might be seconded to Jamaica to work out what's happening with their sprint ranks.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, they did struggle. The interesting thing about the relays, and I spoke to Ebony Lane for Dashing Downs Olympic Adventures before the games for Aussie Home Loans, Gerard. And in the end, she didn't get a run. She was the reserve for the Australian team. But because their team have been named a long way out, they practice the baton changes. Now, obviously, with teams like Jamaica and USA, they'll pick their best sprinters. You won't see them probably in the earlier heats, will you? You'll see them in the final. But they may not have the chemistry in regard to the baton change. And that probably went against Jamaica in a lot of ways.
Well, and I think definitely the US. So the men's 4x100 team just sort of oozes arrogance, and they botched the first change. Coleman's the best 60-meter runner in the world, and he was out and flying, and they all took off too soon and just crashed into each other and got disqualified. So that was hopeless, to be honest. It's fine to have the best sprinters in the world, but you have to get the baton around. So yeah, I think there's an attention to detail, and it's hardly the first time it had happened to the US in recent times in that event as well. So yeah, that definitely plays a role. As some nations are committed, I think you could look through Canada's form and go, every time the US mucks it up, Canada wins. And that's because there's a diligence to what they do, I suspect, is they've figured out we're not quite as fast, but we're going to be more cohesive in the handoffs and not lose time and not get DQ'd and not run out of the lane. And so, yeah, that was a really interesting part to it. They're absolutely electric, the relay, particularly the 4x1s, because they just happen so quickly and so much can go wrong. And then the 4x4s are a bit more of a study in less raw power and a bit more sort of grace and the way that the women of the US dominated that race. Just for a moment, they looked like they'd break the old Soviet Union mark from Seoul, and they only missed it by 1/10 of a second. So, yeah, as the vagaries of the relays were there for all of us to take fright at or admire.
Going into the games, did you think Alfred of St. Lucia would do as well as she's done? I mean, she's won a gold and a silver. She can do much better.
No, she was my sneaky tip in the 100. If I'd been a gambling man, I would have had something on her. And she had Sha'Carri Richardson covered in the semi-final. So I thought going into the final, she was the winner. And then, I mean, she ran out of her skin in the 200 as well. As Gabby Thomas, it was her time, and she was absolutely phenomenal. But I did love I felt like the two, you know, for what that meant to St. Lucia and some of the scenes that we saw from there, which was then one-upped by Botswana when Letsili Tebogo won the 200 and the half-day holiday. And you would have seen in the last 24 hours, they filled their 30,000-seat stadium in Botswana for his return and paraded him around in front of a capacity crowd. I mean, that sort of takes us right to the heart of it all, doesn't it? Is one athlete who provides glory and the long-awaited gold medal in a prestigious event the heroic homecoming and the tens of thousands who go out to share in it. I just thought those were glorious scenes. So Julian Alfred and Letsili Tebogo have such a special place in what happened in Paris, and it defines their country, not just their own deeds, but it really furthers the national character of a couple of countries that bask in their glories.
Now, the men's 100 metres, great call, Gerard. It was a dead heat. I mean, wasn't really.
Yes.
I know. Noah Lyles got it, but did you think it was a dead heat? You couldn't pick between them.
Yeah, I think we'd actually spoken about this, Dan. It did sort of chime somewhere in my mind. Is if you can't see a margin, then
we did.
That becomes the greatest drama of all.
Yes.
And that's what happened for the next. So I got told a story, and I do believe this to be true, is the judge, for want of a better term, so using racing parlance, I think she's Australian, and she resolved that race in 27 seconds. And then it was held. She didn't hold it back, but it got held back for theatrical effect to let the drama build and build and build as both were looking to the scoreboard. I don't think she was super impressed that it was held back in such a way. But it was that as soon as he hit the line, you just realised that these two were going to end up standing together, possibly arm in arm, looking up at the scoreboard, waiting for an eternity to find out which of them had won it. And the difference between winning and losing in that moment, it was imperceptible to the eye, but it will mean everything to their legacy and to their lives. And so the magnitude of all of that is the drama wasn't just the 9.79 seconds, it was the 3 minutes afterwards as the world sort of gasped and waited, and you get to sort of focus on them both. And just even their interactions where Lyles thought that Kishan had probably won it, and then what it all means when it flashed up on the board, and the fact that the two times came up identical, and then you get told that it's 5/1000th of a second, and then trying to make sense of what that margin is. It's probably the best race ever run. Is all 8 under 10 seconds, the tightest spread in Olympic history, 0.12 between all 8 of them. And that was exaggerated because Oblique Seville throws his head back and gives up at the end. So he actually should have been tighter in that finish. It would have been even closer. Fastest times ever for 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. Like that had the absolute maximum drama to it that you wouldn't dare have scripted, I don't think.
I was speaking to Glenn Mitchell after the games as well for Dashing Downs Olympic Adventures for Aussie Home Loans, Gerard, and he said, you think of Kishane Thompson, and he's a silver medalist, which is a great effort, but he's the closest to being a gold medalist that you possibly could be. And you look at Lyles has won it, and he could have been a silver medalist. I mean, that's how tight it was. I mean, we'll never get a race as tight as that, will we? I don't think.
Probably not. You'd love to see, as you know, track and field has these big ambitions, and I think they should. You'd love to see the 8 of them put back on the blocks in 6 months' time in Madison Square Garden or somewhere for the world to watch again. I reckon we'd all tune in to see just what it might look like. Is that the difference between winning and losing is just so narrow in that instance, but so profound. And Kishane Thompson, he's certainly got the time. He'll plot his way to LA, and if he's still that athlete, he might get his gold medal there. But this was Lyles' time, and he had to run faster than he'd ever run before. And Kishane didn't quite run as fast as he had earlier this year, and there's only a heartbeat in it, but that was the difference. So, yeah, I think as an illustration of everything that goes on the line in the Olympics and just how tight it can all be, we'll never get a better one than that. And you would have seen some of the photography from it, whether it's the overhead as they're all lunging or the front on when they're all there. You could stage that race for the next 100 years and not get something that looked anything like it.
How crook do you think Lyles was for the 200 metres? I mean, he had COVID. There were a lot of athletes that got COVID, not only from an Australian perspective, but from a world perspective. It's just a bit unfortunate because he could have won the 100-200 double, and 200 is probably his better event if he has a better event, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, that is his pet event. It's the event he's dominated since Tokyo. So it's terribly unfortunate timing, and just as well that it didn't happen before the 100, or it would have ruined his whole games. He won a bronze medal, sort of deeply affected by COVID in the 200, which is phenomenal in its own right. I reckon you could tell in the semi-finals he didn't, because he got beaten in the semi-final of the 100 by Oblique Seville. Is he kidding to him? But he just didn't look right in the semi-final, and Tobago handled him quite easily. And Tamsin had said to me off air that Tobago would beat him on the final, in the final, on what we'd seen, and then there was just that one shot of him with the mask on from the call room, and that was when you went, something's not right here. And when he collapsed to the track, and he just couldn't get air into the lungs. So phenomenal to win a bronze medal in those circumstances. And I think clearly he was sick. Now, Tobago's run out of his skin, but that time, Lyles has that easily covered at his best. And I would say to you, he was at his best prior to COVID. So, yeah, I think it's really unfortunate. I think it's great that he got the 100, and we don't want to take anything away from Let Silly, but it's part of the legend in a way, and the story that'll get told in the next series of Sprint on Netflix. Not just the triumph of the 100, but then all the drama that happens afterwards. I presume they will have captured all of it, and we'll be able to see it play out for ourselves.
I think I might know the answer to this, and Gerard Whateley's joined me on Dashing Down's Olympic Adventures for Aussie Home Loans to talk about his wonderful experience of calling the track and field in Paris. The 100, 200 metres for men and women, was that your favourite event, or was it the 1,500 metres involving Australian Jess Hull?
Yeah, so I think it ends up being Hull. So my favourite three, I think, at the moment is the men's 100 for all that went into it. Yeah. I thought Sydney McLaughlin-Lavrone breaking the world record in the 400 hurdles was just as good as you would ever see, as just an exhibition of dominance and something that hadn't been done before. And then, our games was always funneling toward the last individual event. And Jess had looked so good in the heat and so good in the semi that you just knew that this was right on. So it was, in a way, it was an unwinnable gold medal, because Faith Kipyegon is the best middle distance runner that the female discipline's ever seen. Yep. But Jess was always winning a medal in that and what we'd seen in the build-up, and then you have to go out and deliver the performance, and she did. She ran that race brilliantly. She was just a fraction further back when they settled than she would have liked, so she slid around, moved up into third. She was in the medals the whole way through. You could pretty well have scripted that Kipyegon would run away from them on the bend, and that's what happened. Then Jess goes past Welteji, and Bell finishes off with the Brits. But yeah, I felt like she was always winning silver in that race, and a huge triumph. And I think everybody recognised what that was, is sometimes the best medals aren't gold. And if you think through, 27 nations won gold medals at the track and field, and 42 medals in total. So that's a totally different proposition to what's happening in other sports. It's truly global. And the fact that the three benchmarks are not only icons of Australian sport, but icons of Australian life, in Edwin Flack, John Landy, and Herb Elliott, you could recognise what she was attempting to do. And I do feel like she got the instant recognition, and she got the satisfaction from it. As she had a brilliant 6 weeks in the lead up, redefined her perfectly timed campaign, and she's got the spoils for it. So yeah, to have the opportunity to offer something to that, is the way that built, is that's something I'll always treasure.
She was just unfortunate that she's come up against the best of all time, and you win consecutive gold medals at 3 Olympic Games in an event like the 1,500 metres. You are an all-time great, if not the greatest, as you said, Gerard.
Yes, yeah. So only Usain Bolt has done that on the track. So that gave you an instant reference point as just to how historic this is. And other than the fact that, I suppose if you're choosing between gold and silver, you would choose gold. It does mean that Jess wins that breakthrough medal for Australia in a race that will never be forgotten. The international accolades, there were just people in our media area just standing and applauding Kipyegon's feat. So yeah, it was so fulfilling to see that, and for Jess to be a big part of that, and the camaraderie that existed in the aftermath, as they all they revere Kipyegon for what she's been able to do, not only on the track, but she had her first child and then came back and has won gold medals since. So she sets a standard that raises the profile of that event and the sport, and all of the other women sort of share in that and revere her for it. So they were lovely scenes in the aftermath. And I did like, Jess said that she couldn't have been happier if she'd won gold. And that, I think that was the sense that we all had around it, is that was the what was on offer to her was to win the silver medal and create some history. And she did it. I thought she did it superbly.
Would you think, Gerard, that she'd be there in LA in 2028? Would you think Kipyegon would be there? And if not, I mean, I know it doesn't automatically mean because she won silver to one of the all-time greats 4 years earlier that she's going to win gold. But if everything stays as is and she's there in LA and Kipyegon's not, she'd be some chance, wouldn't she, of winning that gold?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this as well, and without imposing it on Jess, is you go, if it was in 2 years' time, you'd go, she'll graduate from silver to gold. So if we took a guess and used Bolt as the trajectory, that's probably the peak for Faith Kipyegon, and she'll either retire or diminish just in the natural course of things. So Jess is 27, she'll be 31 in LA, and I haven't got it all in front of me. And Faith was 30 at these games. So yes, and Jess has just made the breakthrough in the last 2 months for all the work that she's done and the maturing and the learning the race and the strategy of it. And so my gut feeling seeing here is yes, is in 4 years' time, that might be her. So Kathy laid the foundations in Atlanta and then won in Sydney, and Sally laid them in Beijing and won in London. So I think he could make a reasonable case that's a possibility without sort of overlaying the next 4 years on Jess. But yeah, she's reached the point where she has such control over what's happening in those races now, notwithstanding that, Bell was terrific from Great Britain, and you just never know what will arrive on the scene. But yeah, I think that's very possible. If it was in 2 years' time, I'd feel super confident. 4 years is a long time, but if Jess dedicates herself to that, I could absolutely see that happening in LA.
What about the other Australians in the track events? Were you satisfied with how they performed? Did they exceed yours and Tamsin's expectations, or reach yours and Tamsin's expectations?
So I think when we spoke, is the possibility of our teenagers having their first Olympic experience in great style. That happened. So Tori Lewis ran a PB in her heat of the 200, went straight through to the semi-finals. Claudia Hollingsworth, so good in her heat, straight through to the semi-finals. Peyton Craig, same in the 800, ripper of a race. And then he either ran the PB there or he ran the PB in the semi-final. So absolutely perfect way to start your Olympic career and set yourself up for what's to come on trajectories that will climax in Brisbane. So the possibility of making finals in LA and then being a really prominent figure on the blocks in Brisbane. So I thought those three did absolutely everything that you would have hoped for. And then Abby Caldwell won a repechage. And there was another repechage win. So yes, I thought that the core of the future were terrific. The problem with the here and the now, as we touched on, is Rowan Browning has been injured all year, and Peter Bowl just hasn't been the same athlete since the bungled doping saga. And they both ran like that. Browning was nowhere, and he spoke about that in the aftermath. And it's really hard because in the cycle, if you get injury in the Olympic year, it just doesn't give you any chance. And Bowl was confident in himself, as he should have been an Olympian again, but he's nowhere near the athlete that we saw in Tokyo. So they were sort of foreseeable and unfortunate. And you just can't fluke your Olympic performances. You have to have it all in order. You have to have been able to do the work. And I just don't think in either instance they'd been able to get the work in. So yeah, it was a bit of a mixed bag. And poor Michelle Jenica, who was brilliant over the first two hurdles, and then crashed at the third, and crashed, spectacularly, and was injured, and bravely came out in the repechage, but just could barely go. So that was so unfortunate, because I feel like she was in for a really good run, certainly in that that heat and maybe beyond. So yeah, I feel like we lived the whole mixed bag, didn't we?
We sure did. Can Peter Bowl come back, Jared? Or you're worried, well, or your concerns, probably a better word, isn't it, in regard to sport? Are you concerned that we might have seen the best of him?
Yeah, I feel like that's up to him, isn't it? And just what toll this has all taken. So it's had a huge impact on his enjoyment of the sport, and his comfort in it. So I don't know. I don't know whether you can put that aside now that the Olympic cycle's over. And 4 years is such a long way away, when you're in those circumstances. So yeah, I would probably. I think the 800 has now changed hands as Peyton Craig will break the records of Deng and Bowl in the short term. He's totally on his way. And so that's exciting on one front and unfortunate on another front. But yeah, it would be a huge effort to get back to the pointy end that he was when he was fourth in an Olympic final.
Can I ask you from a calling perspective, and you and Tamsin worked really well together, watching a lot of the track and field athletics, especially the heats, was a little bit late for a lot of us, obviously, in the middle of the morning.
Yeah.
But I'm a bit of a night owl, so I saw a lot. You would get, let's say, a 400 metres hurdle, then you get a 5,000 metre race. How tough was it, Gerard? And particularly early days, or how challenging was it early days to get your head around doing a sprint race and then doing a middle distance race?
Yeah, so the first day, the first session, my head was spinning at the end of it. So I'd had I'd thought it through a lot, because on day one you're calling heats of the 100, and then you finish the day calling the 10,000. So those are the extremes of it. So I'd thought about it a lot, but it was just so, it came at you so ferociously. And as soon as they'd finished this set, you're onto your next folder, and your next folder are races that are going to go 2 and 3 minutes. So it just took me a little bit to get just to be able to transfer from one to the next. But the work that it done is, and as you well know, is that the craft is totally different. Is you've got 9 seconds for this race, and then you've got 30 minutes for this race. And then once you're there doing a lap or 2 laps, then it's beautiful. And then you sort of got a lot of time to set them up and follow them around. And the 1500s were glorious. You can work in and out of Tamsin. And so, yeah, it took just a little bit to get just to settle, because it all happened so quickly on morning one. And then once we're the other side of the 100 final for men, it was just a bit of a righto. I know exactly what we're doing now, and in a way you're sort of through the most pressure packed, and those were the most fun days where you could throw it around a little bit and have a little bit of fun and just have the comfort of knowing what was going on. And yeah, so they're wildly different, and it's so what a spread to be able to get is the race that goes 9.79 and the race that goes 2 hours and 27 minutes in the same discipline. So yeah, I absolutely loved it. And I remember there was a point you're going, this is just such great fun. And you've now sort of got it pegged as to what the rhythms of it are and what the pace of it is. And then you can sort of play with your craft from there.
Greatest thing you've ever done? I mean, I've asked you this question before. I mean, you've done a lot of great things in your career, but is this number one now?
It is, yeah. And it sort of felt like it probably was going to be. And it was even bigger than so I was set for it to be big, and it was even bigger. It's a bit like, it is like going and calling the grand final in the morning, coming home and having a nap, and then going and calling the grand final again at night. Yeah. And do it over and over and over and over and over and over and over. So you're in this elevated environment every time that you go back, and there's so much work to do between sessions to be ready. And so it was incredibly challenging. It was so great to be in the middle of. And I thought the whole games, not just the track and field, it just reminded us that the Olympics operates on an elevated plane, and it's a while since we've been able to experience that, but it captivates all of us, and the spread of sports and the stories and the possibilities and the heartache that's involved in the moments of triumph. It is different to everything else, and it's just a bit bigger than everything else. As not that that diminishes grand final day in any way, because it means so much to all of us, but the Olympics is special. It's rare. And I just, it was a great reminder. We hadn't had a great games for a while, but this was a great games. And the Olympics does stay special. And I mean, when you get to our age, it's not often that you're getting to do something for the first time. So it was glorious to be a part of, and I will always think fondly of it.
It's a nice early 50. I know you turned 50 in October, Gerard, if you don't mind me saying, but
Yeah.
It's a nice early 50th birthday present for you, isn't it?
Yeah. Now that it's done, and you can reflect on it, as being fulfilling. It is. It's gosh, it's something I'll never forget, and who knows what the world is like in 4 years' time. So I did take a moment to just sort of cherish it and breathe it in, and and be able to share it. I mean, that's to be able to share it with people back home, and to be able to tell those stories is, I meant to mention Reese Holder in there, who is on the cusp of breaking Darren Clark's revered 400-meter record. It's just suddenly these things just come in front of you, and you go, right, so we're now following Reese Holder. As I presume that he'll break Clark's record in the next 12 months. And what a moment that is. Think about how long that record has stood for. And then we go on his journey towards LA. So I loved every minute of it. The track is amplified at a point in history like we haven't experienced before. And I hope that they seize it. I hope the likes of Gabby Thompson and Noah Lyles are able to propel track to be something more than just once every 4 years, and really crack the mainstream in the US. And I think the quality of racing that we saw gives them all that chance.
First time you worked with Tamsin Lewis, from day one, it was like you'd worked together every day of your life. I mean, I interviewed her as well for Dashing Down's Olympic Adventures for Aussie Home Loans, and a great talent. Gee, she's good, isn't she?
She's so good. She's absolutely brilliant with the way that she does it. So she's got the two streams, which is very rare. So she's got the technical, and she's got the tactical, and she's got the times, and she can explain to you what's happening in a race. But then she takes the time to learn the stories of the athletes. So which gives you a chance to have an emotional stake in something as simple as, this guy loves to wear character socks in his races, and this guy's mum passed away earlier this year, and everything is dedicated. So she gave us the whole gamut of what you could buy into, so that you felt like over the course of a race, oh, I love this guy's story, or I hope she wins for this reason. She was so brilliant on that front. And I always think when you sit with the best expert commentators, you learn. So you're not just calling together, but you're actually learning from them. And I learned so much across those 11 days. So I know that everybody watching did as well, because she was teaching me, so she was teaching everybody. Yeah, I loved our time together, and we had a lot of time together. She's hilarious. And she was coming back. I've been at the school sports today. She was there yesterday, so she got back Tuesday night. Wow. And she's the head of sport at Strathcona, and she had their school athletics day. So she was straight back to the track. And honestly, I reckon she would not have been happier being anywhere else in the world other than at the track the day after getting home from the Olympics.
And she would have hit the ground running, and she would have dominated as she does, in a lovely, friendly way. Absolutely no doubt about that. Now, Gerard, other than doing the laundry, of which Robbo was absolutely obsessed about last night on 360, typical Robbo, in the first couple of days when you were just getting used to the pace of it all, did you have a chance to relax in the afternoon in Paris, or in the evening Australian time in between the morning and night sessions?
I rushed to venues in the first few days to make sure that I had an Olympic experience before the stadium. Yeah. And then once the track started, they were 20-hour days. I've never worked harder at anything, and just every minute between sessions. So I had an idea of the way I wanted to do things, and I realized after the first day that wasn't going to be possible, because there just weren't enough minutes between sessions. So I just made a quick adjustment. But no, as we would get, you'd be on an 8 a.m. bus, you get back about 1:30, work. Tamsin taught me how to do it. So you have to work one session ahead. So in the afternoon, you would prepare tomorrow's morning session. And then when you got home at night, you would prepare tomorrow night's session. You had to get one session ahead. You couldn't live hand to mouth. And so that took just every minute that was available. And you're on fumes by the end of it, but it's the adrenaline that kicks in and takes you through. So it was good to see what I wanted to see beforehand, because once it locked in, I knew it would be relentless, but it was actually it just took so much to be able to be ready session to session, which I love that part of it. But I've never been, not since cramming for exams, have I been under such time pressure to be ready to catch the bus with all the work that I wanted to get done.
I could just imagine, Gerard. But knowing you're so organised, you would have been on time, unlike me. I remember the month I was always running. I used to get there, but I was always often running late for the bus with the late, great Mr. Morford in tow with me as well, getting stuck into me about us being late. But anyway, that's a story for another day. The field performances, obviously you were covering the track, and Steve and Dave were covering the field, but great efforts by Australia, and of course in the walk as well. We did really well there, didn't we?
Yeah, got everything that was possible. And this generation had wanted to win more than 6 medals. So 12 was obviously the historic marker from Melbourne, but twice in the generations gone by that the athletics team had got to 6. This generation was desperate to get to 7, and they did. And they did that because everybody delivered against what was possible. So Nina Kennedy, the night that Nina Kennedy was over on the left jumping the pole vault, and Matt Denny was on the right in the discus circle, it was such a great night. And we're trying to call track events whilst watching when the Australians came up, and Dave Colbert is over on the right, fist pumping. It was just great. And, Jemima did the business in the walks, and so I felt great for them. And really only Mackenzie Little she was probably the only one who walked away disappointed with what was possible and not being able to meet it. And then Jess Hull was the swing medal as to whether she would get the 7th medal or not, and she did. So I thought they were brilliant. They should be so proud. I think Dave recounted during the marathon that there were the 7 medals and 2 other top 8 performances, and that's the difference, is to convert top 8 into medals rather than be 4th, 5th or 6th. Then you end up with 4 medals and a whole bunch of top 8 finishes. Their conversion rate was first class. So that says a lot about their dedication. It says a lot about the program. It's a nod to Athletics Australia in the way that they've got it going at the moment. And hopefully it's a forerunner. There was a lot in this team which was going to pave the way for the future. So they got the here and the now, and I reckon they've sort of paved the way for successful days ahead.
Now, talking of the marathon and also talking of Athletics Australia, there was the controversy, Gerard. We know that in the men's marathon, Brett Robinson pulled out and they were able to get a replacement 2 weeks out. There was a lot of rumours. We heard it back here, the coverage back here, that Sinead Diver was injured with a foot injury, and then it was another injury, and she lasted 1.2 Ks. Lisa Waitman was the reserve, the one who missed out to, of course, Jess Stenson, despite the fact she produced a quicker time in her marathon in the lead up to the Olympic Games, but she wasn't in Paris. Do you think she should have been in Paris? And do you think maybe Sinead Diver should have been a bit more complicit regarding her injury?
My feeling on this is all yes. So I don't think it's sort of fully resolved yet with all the suitable information. So the first thing to say is the selection of Jess Stenson was spot on.
Yeah.
They made that choice around the course and the challenges and championship performances, and that was spot on. She led the marathon at halfway. She finished 13th. So a salute. Right. That was controversial, but they nailed it. Yeah. And then not having Lisa in Paris, I actually don't think you need hindsight. That was a mistake. Is the Ethiopians the day before in the men's had a reserve there. They pulled the trigger on their reserve, and he ended up winning the race. Now, there's probably some ducks and drakes in all of that, but I think that's a pretty good principle to come from. And then there would have been a moment in time with a reserve in place where you could have had what amounts to the grand final fitness test for Sinead Diver. Is you have to prove your fitness before you can take the line, because running 1,200 meters of a marathon and dropping out when there were 3 others who qualified, that's not really acceptable, is it?
No.
So, I think there's a lot in the background, there's a lot of decisions that might have been made differently that could have led to a difference on the day the day itself. Now, that's not to. I mean, Sinead is clearly distressed by what's happened
Yes.
and all that surrounds that, and I understand that, and I'm sympathetic towards that. I'm a little bit more on Athletics Australia here. I think thoroughness, particularly with what had happened with the men, logic was send the reserve, pick a moment, do a fitness test, and everyone can decide how they feel about it. But yeah, that wasn't a great result when there were 6 women who were so prominent. 3 took the start and 1 lasted 1,200 meters. That feels unsatisfactory.
I mean, Lisa Waitman said she only needed 72 hours to get there. Can I be a conspiracy theorist here, Gerard, and say that if they had have sent Lisa and Sinead pulls out, and she probably should have pulled out before the race, and Lisa does better than both Jess and Genevieve, who did very well as well and was really nice in the comments she made, as you know, about Sinead Diver and the injury and what a great teammate she was, that there would have been egg in their face, and it was egg in their face that they didn't want.
So I'm going to hope that that's not the case,
Right.
because that would be a really poor way to govern your decision making around it. So I simply don't know the answer to that. But when you have, it's actually a good thing to have so many quality athletes, and then you put the provisions in place to make sure that you get the best result out of it. It just doesn't feel to me, once they made their decisions and the Waitman camp blew up, I suspect relationships fracture.
Yeah.
And maybe that does play a role, and it shouldn't have. What should have happened is the next best athlete should have been on standby the whole way through in case something either unforeseen or that you were warned about transpired, and you could have the right athlete on the start line when it mattered most. So I reckon there are, even on the most generous interpretation of what happened, there's a lot of lessons to be learnt from this, and you wouldn't do it the same way again.
Well, they had 5, as I said to you a bit earlier, 5 in the women's 4x100 metre relay, and they took Ebony Lane out, even though she was in and she was going to run the first leg. And as I said, I spoke to her on my program as well, and she was definitely in, and she was definitely in during the games until they made the change. So that fifth athlete was there, and that wasn't an injury change. That was a tactic change.
Yeah, and I think that's the level of thoroughness that we would expect across the board. I reckon that's a reasonable expectation to have. And even if you think about the men's 4x100, is neither Browning nor Azzopardi ran in that. So they had that program so well set up that they still broke the national record. They were dead stiff not to be in the final. But so salute. This is why I don't want to be critical across the board, because a salute, that's exactly the way that it should work. They had 6 the top 2 seeds in a way opt not to run, but the program is so well set up and the training has been so thorough that those 4 boys take the track and break the national record, which has stood since the mid-90s. Like that's outstanding. It just doesn't feel like the same level of detail that governed there was applied in the marathon scenario. And it might have, and while it would have been distressing and devastating not to be on the start line, is we see this in grand finals every year. Teams either take risks and it blows up on them, or there's a really heartrending story where a player misses, but it's for the collective good. I don't think that was handled the way that it should have been.
Gerard, before I let you go, I'm sure you've heard all the talk about breakdancing, which is just taken off in regard to the publicity. Should it have been a sport at the Olympic Games in the first place? And the fact that it was in Paris, and also the fact that it got its origins in America, in the ghettos of New York, and LA's the next Olympics, should have they kept it? And what's your view on Ray Gunn? Has she handled this beautifully? I reckon she has. I reckon she has handled it beautifully.
I suspect that might be right. So my feeling is breaking was a mistake. So I'm not, I think I said this to you last time, I'm totally pro new sports. I think the rock climbing is phenomenal. And
brilliant.
Just so great. You two stand next to each other, race up that wall and hit the timer. That's sport. I can understand that. I can watch that all day long. It was unfathomable what was happening with breaking. So I don't think that's not sport. And how it was being scored, and being in daylight rather than under strobe lighting. I didn't understand any of it unless they were going to throw down like the Sharks and the Jets and sort of fight at the end of it. If there was going to be a rumble at the end of it, then I could have understood that. So not appropriate for an Olympics. If it turns out, I feel like the three most profitable athletes out of this games for the next 6 months will include Ray Gunn. Like if she doesn't, she'll be on Jungle. She'll be on, so that's I'm a Celebrity. She'll be on Dancing with the Stars. I don't know. Did she realize in the moment how ridiculous this all was and then played to the ridiculousness of it and the notoriety and the fame and the opportunity that comes with that? If she did, big salute because she's gamed the system. Otherwise, it's all really unfortunate. I think she probably has been failed by her own event. Having to dress like an Australian one-day cricketer for that just didn't feel like the whole thing confused me. And if she has 12 months worth of fame out of it, then good on her. And hopefully it made the experience worthwhile. But no, we won't be the poorer for not having breaking at the next Olympics. And we'll never see it again.
I agree, Gerard. And of course, she's got a doctorate as well. So she's a pretty smart lady, as we know.
Yes.
And talking of...
And I think that's the risk is that we diminish her as a person because of all that goes around it. And that's the bit that I think is wrong, is there's a way to recognize this for what it was. And then I hope one day we go, she was just too smart for everyone. I hope that's what's happened.
And what about Snoop Dogg? Money well spent?
I think it played really well in the US.
Yeah.
So that's... And we saw in the closing ceremony, didn't we? So
yes, Paris
gave us the full French experience, the history, the iconic images, the monuments. The US is going to give us Hollywood, and so it's going to be completely different. But Red Hot Chili Peppers with shirts off, you go, fellas, put your shirts on. You're of a certain age. Tom Cruise, so it's going to be exactly what you think it should be. I did a Super Bowl in LA and it was the full Hollywood show and it was brilliant in a totally different way to what Paris was. So that they'll be great in their own way. And the fact that they've got SoFi, best stadium in the world, the Coliseum with all the history of the games there. They've got Santa Monica Beach. They'll figure out how to use the Hollywood Hills. So everyone will learn lessons from what happened in Paris, and LA will be part of that. But it's going to be garish. It's not going to be charming and historic. It's going to be in your face, full on American pop culture. And so as long as you know what that is going in, that's totally okay.
And if you know who's the president, it'll be even more garish than we think it's going to be.
Will he be finished by then?
Not quite.
It'll be the last days.
It'll be near the end. Near the end, if he gets in, which we hope he doesn't. That's a story for another day. So just imagine what that's going to be like. And before I let you go, you've gone from one great event back to another back here where we have absolutely no idea, Gerard, who's going to win this AFL Premiership, do we?
Never been a season like it. It's confounding and it's brilliant. So where does it take us? I think you and I are a bit the same. As Hawthorn's form over 3 months, so they challenge the imagination. But if you just coldly boil it down to 3 months worth of form, like I'm big on your Bulldogs, but they've got to make sure that they still make it. They've got to make it.
Yeah, they've got to make it, Gerard. Drive me mad.
So you look at
look
at the ladder and go, I don't believe in them. I don't believe in them. I don't believe in them. Hang on, someone's got to win it. So yeah, I can't wait to see what happens next, because you know that this won't change, as I reckon once the tone is set for a season. There are going to be upsets this week. There'll be upsets next week. So nothing will settle. And then I bet we get upsets in the finals. We'll feel like, oh, well, they're playing in Sydney, so they'll win. I bet that's not what happens. I reckon once you're into a season like this, it takes you the whole journey, and you've just got to hang on. You got to have the imagination for it. So I think we're going to get a climax unlike anything we've seen since the Dogs won it in 2016, I reckon.
It was the middle of the day when Port were playing Sydney. Did you have to look at the score a few times? It was 70. No, I did too. I was at a concert and I said, what? No.
Somebody, I've forgotten where we were up to, but somebody showed it to me. And no. What the hell's going on there? So that made no sense whatsoever. And, think about Port's trajectory to be able to produce a result like that, given the doubts that have swirled around them. So Yeah, it's I'm all in for it. I'm all in for it. And if you want to deal in absolutes and try to pin it down, I think you're going to be confused by it. Is just open your mind to where it might take us, and maybe it leads us to the Bulldogs and the Hawks on the last day.
Well, I hope so, Gerard. I'll be there, and you'll notice me. I'll be on fire, but long way to go. As you said, Gerard, they let me down against Adelaide, who were very, very good as they've been all year, and still they've got to make it yet. So let's not put the cart before the horse. Now, do
That's
you get
right.
any time off at all, or you've got
No, no.
footy, you've got racing, you've
Yeah.
got cricket? When do you get a rest, Gerard?
No, I'll pinch a break straight after the footy, so I'll do the Monday after the footy season. But at this time of year, like you just had to get back and get back into the footy, which is so good late. Yeah, so I'll steal a couple of weeks after the footy's finished, and then be racing into cricket. What a great summer's ahead of us with India on our shores. So yeah, you wouldn't want to be anywhere else, Dan. Is that
Oh,
that's the easiest way to rationalise it. Even if I took time off, I'd still be watching all of it, so I may as well be working there.
exactly, Gerard. You're very lucky, man. Look, thanks so much again for your time before the games and after the games. I really appreciate it. It's good that we could have a chat so soon after the games. You did an outstanding job. You should be very proud of yourself. And we look forward to having you part of the Channel 9 coverage. I know it's still 4 years away and a lot can change, but I'd be very surprised if you're not there in 2028. And thanks for joining us. The Dashing Downs Olympic Adventures for Aussie Home Loans are areas of expertise for purchasing a property, owner-occupied or investment, building a property portfolio, refinancing, also debt consolidation, cash out, construction, pre-approvals, first home buyers, equipment loans, car loans and personal loans. Enjoy the footy, Gerard, and we'll chat soon. Thanks so much.
Lovely to share with you, Dan. Good on you.